Beautiful and strong people. Welcome to lesson 2 of the bench press mastery. Today we're going to talk all about leg drive and how to properly make use of the leg drive. The force starts from the floor, not just the chest. You will see gym bros thinking about the bench press as a chest exercise. However, we as powerlifters, we kind of have to think about the bench press a little bit more holistically, because we don't really train the bench press as a means to grow the chest, although that's a byproduct of it. It seems like my English is breaking down. We want to think about the bench press as a full body movement. And this full body movement is going to come a lot from the leg drive. And the leg drive, we're going to see that it requires a little bit of voluntarily focus in order to actually get it right. It's not, especially for a beginner, it's not really easy to connect with that, especially if you've done some bodybuilding work before. However, when you do get the hang of the leg drive, you're going to notice how your bench just absolutely explodes. There are different ways of actually going about the leg drive, and that's something that we're going to explore in the next slides. But also, we're going to go through the coaching process. We're going to find the right leg drive that's actually going to fit you and your structure the best. I want you to remember the analogy that I actually made in the last lesson, in which we talked a little bit more comprehensively about the setup. You can't fire a cannon from a canoe. So no matter how strong your chest, your shoulders, your triceps are, which is the cannon, if you're trying to fire it from an unstable surface, it's going to be very hard to actually make use of all that force. So this is where the leg drive comes into play. The leg drive is pretty much helping you to leverage your joints, your muscle tissue to generate the most force possible against the barbell. It anchors the lower body to support the press by providing the horizontal stability, and it's actually helping your vertical press. So through that pushing back, through that tension that you're generating against the floor, what you're actually doing is provide a lot of stability for your shoulders to exert the vertical motion, which is the press itself. It also helps you maintain the arch and torso position during the bench press. If you're not really focused on the leg drive, you're going to notice that there is a tendency of your torso to actually flex forward or just, more so sink. What the leg drive is actually doing is pushing back. So it's not allowing that force, it's not allowing the barbell to actually sink into you, but rather to actually be pushed back as you're going through the lowering part of the motion. So let's see what the leg drive is and what it isn't. It's not a violent push of the bench when you're trying to press. Okay, so it's not, you're going with the bar down and that you're using that leg drive to actually push the bar back and finish it off with the triceps. That's not what leg drive really is. It's actually a sustained, controlled tension pushing towards your shoulders. And this is where it's key. It's controlled, sustained tension. So you're attentively thinking about it through the control, and you're sustaining it through the entirety of the press. Not only when you're doing the press, not only after you're finishing the movement. From the moment in which you unrack to the moment in which you're going through the descent, from the moment in which it actually is posed on your chest, and from the moment in which you are actually generating the press, you're going through your sticking points and you're finishing the movement. Through all those phases, you have to take care of the leg drive and initiate the leg drive, because that's what's going to keep pretty much everything in. It's keeping the tension in there. It's keeping the position of your shoulders. It's making your press stable and strong. Now, as I said, there are multiple ways in which we can actually go about using the leg drive. Okay, we can go with a closer stance or with a wider stance in the bottom images. We can go with our shins a little bit more vertical or with feet a little bit more tucked. Each one of these work really well, and it should be taken under account the, let's say, individual differences. Okay, so based on how long your femurs are, based on, let's say, your torso position and so on, That all will dictate what your preferred leg drive should be. Okay, so it's not one size fits all. And we're actually going to explore through the coaching process what kind of leg drive is actually the best for you. The vertical shin, for example, this image is a little bit more quad dominant. It gives you a lot more control through the leg drive motion, but it's a lot more demanding from an energy perspective because you have to always think about the leg drive and you have to really attentively think about doing a leg extension to bring that tension into your neck. So it may be a little bit demanding from an energy perspective. However, it's actually going to give you a lot more control during the press, and the reps will look a little bit cleaner rep by rep. Okay, so there will be that consistency part, of course, with the observation that you're actually attentively thinking about the leg drive. The touch point will be a little bit higher because you're pretty much pushing, you're arching a little bit more through your thoracic spine than you are from your lumbar spine. In contrast, when you're having your feet a little bit more tucked, it happens pretty much the opposite. So you're actually driving, your hips are actually tucked a little bit, okay? So your legs are brought a little bit more under you. And because of that, that center of mass kind of starts to shift a little bit more towards the lower part of the press. So that would be something like the upper part of your abs, let's say your sternum. That really depends on your anthropometry, your grip. So whether or not you're actually using a wide grip or a short grip, a close grip, the length of your arms and so on. So there is some variability. Now, what's really cool about this position is the fact that it's not as demanding from an energy perspective because you don't really need to focus so much on the leg drive, okay? Especially if you have really short legs. When you're actually bringing them under, you don't really need to worry about your hips shooting off the bench because they're always going to be connected to the bench. So it's a really cool way to actually practice position. And, you're going to have a little bit more positional, let's say, awareness through this setup. It's pretty helpful for the beginners to actually learn to use the leg drive. And if necessary, they can actually move more towards this kind of leg drive, a little bit more active leg drive. Now, because you're having your feet a little bit more tucked, you're arching more from your lumbar spine and less from your thoracic spine. So you're going to have your, let's say, the chest is not going to be as high as you would from this position. We can go with a closed stance or a wide stance. And again, this is going to, first of all, matter a lot in regards to what kind of mobility you have. Okay, so if your hips do allow you to actually keep your feet a little bit more open, some people naturally fall into this position and just have a better overall stability. Some others just don't really have their, let's say, hips built to have their feet open in this position, and they're actually doing a little bit better with their feet a little bit closer. You can even literally hug the bench. So it's not one size fits all. You don't necessarily need to be in one particular category. We're going to explore together what kind of leg drive is actually going to benefit you the most. So we're going to go through step by step how to cue the leg drive. And we already went through this a little bit on the first lesson during the setup. First of all, we want to pre-tension the floor before actually going through the bridging process and through the unrack process. So we want to get a feel of the floor. You're going to see me do that with my heels, with my toes, excuse me. You can do that by pressing and pretty much finding that sweet position using your toes and your heels. Me being a rather short individual, so I don't really have long femurs or long tibias. So for me, it's a little bit easier to actually find that sweet spot and shimmy my feet through my toes. Now, once you're actually finding that position, you have a really good connection with your legs. You want to push hard through your toes. And again, I'm using my toes. You can either, if you're a tall individual, this might not really be the best idea. You can actually just be on your heel and on your toes. The idea is that you want to really push as hard as possible against the ground so you can actually generate that force back through the bridging process and really try to pretty much tension your neck as much as possible. And remember, you need to actually have your traps relaxed in order to do so, because through the relaxation of your traps, your scaps will automatically depress and retract into position. Okay, so you're going through the unrack process, you're constantly leg driving, you're constantly making use of that tension into your legs. After the unrack, you want to drop your hips, but you want to do that slow to actually remain engaged with your leg drive. So you do not want to just drop your hips. Remember, you're pushing your hips to the bar. Okay, so you're not dropping the hips, you're actually pushing the hips to the bench until your hips are actually connected with the bench. You want to hold a constant pressure throughout the rep. Okay, so think about pushing horizontally into your traps like you would slide off the bench. So through the entirety of the repetition, from the moment in which you unrack to the moment in which you finish off the movement, you want to constantly think about driving back. You want to constantly think about the pressure that you're actually exerting against the floor, and you want to think about constantly driving that tension back into your neck. You can even think about, doing more so a neck press than you're actually doing a bench press. So in order to make it a little bit easier to understand, I'm going to give you a couple of analogies. Okay. Analogy number one is going to be, and you can also find this in my content. Imagine you have a very thin layer of glass underneath the bench, okay, just where your hips may be. You want to make sure that through the process of actually doing the bench press, you don't want that glass to break, because if it's going to break, those pieces of the glass will hurt your ass. So you do not want that. So you want your entire lower body weight to actually be sustained by your leg drive. Another analogy that you can actually use pretty much in the same vein, you're having a scale just underneath your glutes. That scale has to read 0 at all times. So you do not want to leave any kind of weight on that scale. You want it to read 0 from the moment in which your hips make contact with the bench to the moment in which you're actually finishing off the movement. Another cool analogy that you can even play around in your gym if you have some utility benches like these is you have a half a bench. So you're literally supported only around your shoulder blades. Your mission is to do the press exactly the same like you would actually do without having a full bench. So you want to think about having only half the bench, and that half of the bench is actually supported around your shoulder blades, and it would be no difference when it comes to the pressing motion. All your weight is actually supported into your legs. And pretty much the easiest analogy that I can actually think about, your bench workout is not a bench workout, it's not a chest workout, it's not a tricep workout, it's a leg workout. You want to bring so much tension into your legs to the point in which you're actually getting sore around your legs. You want to turn this workout, this bench workout, into a leg workout. And when you're actually doing that, your press will definitely improve. The stability component of it will help you to transfer so much more force against the barbell, and you will be able to put a lot more load on the bar. So this was the leg drive lesson. As you can see, it's been quite rooted into the setup process, and we're going to find out that pretty much every small minutia of the technique is actually connected one to the other. We want our focus to be partially on one of those cues and just focus for the time being on the setup. When we nail that down, we're going to move to the leg drive. When we finish off with the leg drive, we're going to move into the wedge, which is going to be the next lesson, becoming one with the bar. What I want you to do, however, is as you're going through these cues as you're going through these ideas, when you're going into your workout, I want you to focus at one thing at a time. It's going to be hard for you to actually learn all these concepts if you're trying to focus on all of them at once. So you want to just pick one. If you mastered, not necessarily master, because you're not really going to master the setup from the first moment, but give it 1 to 2 weeks to actually focus on the setup. Give it 1 to 2 weeks to actually focus on the leg drive. Give it 1 to 2 weeks to actually focus on the wedge. And with each session that you're actually going through it, things will start to connect. So you may potentially not feel like it's connecting right now. However, as you're actually bringing the focus through the cueing process on what you should be focusing on each session, you're going to start to have those aha moments. You're going to be like, so this is what I should be feeling. So this is how it should feel. So this is exactly what Alan actually told me during that lesson. That's where my focus should be. So don't worry if things are not really connecting right now. Just stick with it, and those aha moments will come only through the process of actually being consistent with your focus. I'll catch you on the next one.